All right, here we are, Song of Solomon for beginners, celebrating the beauty of love and relationships. This is lesson number 3 in this series, and the title of today's lesson is The Celebration of Marriage, and we will be covering chapters 3 verse 6 to chapters 5 verse 1 in the Song of Solomon. Let's begin our lesson with a review of some of the ideas that we've been talking about in the last couple of lessons. In lesson 1 and 2 of our series on Song of Solomon, we explored the beauty and the depth of love as it begins and as it blossoms. Lesson number 1 introduced the foundation of love, focusing on mutual admiration and the importance of self-control. The opening verses highlighted how love grows out of a genuine appreciation for both character as well as physical qualities, reminding us that true attraction encompasses the whole person. We also learned about the necessity of godly restraint, as emphasized by the refrain, "Do not arouse or awaken love until it pleases." And that refrain is repeated several times throughout this poem. It teaches the value of patience in preserving love's beauty and its sanctity. Lesson number 2 built on this foundation by delving into the excitement and challenges of love that is in full bloom. Using vivid springtime imagery, we saw how readiness and trust are crucial for cultivating a successful relationship. The bride's joy in her beloved's pursuit highlighted the thrill of mutual affection, while the little foxes, that term comes up several times, little foxes served as a reminder to protect love from minor issues that could harm its growth. Through the bride's longing for her beloved, we were reminded to trust God's timing, as love flourishes best when nurtured with care and patience. Together, these lessons invite us to celebrate love while honoring its sacred design and trusting God's plan for successful relationships. And so as we move on from the excitement and the anticipation of love in bloom highlighted in lesson 2, we now turn to the celebration of love's fulfillment in lesson number 3. This next part of our series focuses on the beauty of covenant commitment and the joy of marital intimacy, as expressed in Song of Solomon, chapter 3, verse 6, all the way through chapter 5, verse 1. Through the imagery of a wedding procession and the poetic admiration of the bride and the groom, we'll see how love reaches its fullest expression within the sanctity of marriage. And so we begin with the imagery of the wedding procession, chapter 3, verses 6 to 11. We begin with verse 6. It says, "What is this coming up from the wilderness, like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all scented powders of the merchant?" So here the bride is depicted as coming in a cloud of fragrant perfumes, symbolizing her beauty and purity and her readiness for marriage. The idea of the columns of smoke evoke imagery of grandeur and holiness, connecting the celebration to the sacredness of covenant love. In verse 7 it says, "Behold, it is the traveling couch of Solomon, 60 mighty men around it, of the mighty men of Israel." Here the presence of warriors guarding the procession underscores the importance and the protection of the marriage covenant. This highlights the weight and the dignity of marriage as a solemn and as a celebrated union. And then in verse 8 it says, "All of them are wielders of the sword, expert in war. Each man has his sword at his side, guarding against the terrors of the night." Again, the imagery of armed protection signifies the effort required to safeguard love and the marital bond. Marriage is not merely a private event, but a commitment that deserves honor and defense and care. Then another image, the community involvement and the joy that one has in marriage. Verse 9, King Solomon has made for himself a sedan chair from the timber of Lebanon. The chair in which the groom is riding is made of fine materials, reflects the value and the celebration that surrounds marriage. Here, marriage is portrayed as something precious and worthy of preparation and adornment. In verse 11, it says, "Go forth, O daughters of Zion, and gaze on King Solomon with the crown with which his mother has crowned him on the day of his wedding and on the day of his gladness of heart." The daughters of Zion are invited to witness the joy and the splendor of the wedding, showing that marriage is a communal celebration, not necessarily a private one. The reference to Solomon's crown emphasizes the honor and the joy of the marital covenant, as well as its significance for the broader community. It is held in honor, marriage held in honor by the larger community. So there are a couple of key lessons here that we get simply from these opening verses. First, marriage is a covenant. The wedding procession symbolizes the sacredness of marriage, not just as a legal agreement, but as a covenantal bond, blessed and honored by God and witnessed by the community. Secondly, there's joy and celebration. Marriage is meant to be a source of deep joy, celebrated not only by the couple, but also, again, by the community, reflecting its significance in the broader fabric of life. A marriage, a wedding, so to speak, brings joy to everyone, not just the couple or the families, but the entire community can rejoice wholeheartedly when they see a young couple coming into a covenantal relationship. And then the third point, protecting the covenant. There's a lot said about defending this covenant. The imagery of armed warriors guarding the procession reminds us that love and marriage require effort and intentionality and protection against exterior and interior threats. The application, well, application for individuals who are preparing for marriage. The application for them is to reflect on the significance of marriage as a covenant relationship, not just an emotional or a practical union. In other words, take it seriously. You're entering into a covenant with another individual. Also, approach marriage with a sense of honor and readiness, preparing yourself spiritually and emotionally as well as relationally for something new and something wonderful that is about to take place in your life. For married couples, the idea here is to celebrate the joy of your union on a regular basis, remembering the sacredness of your commitment. Take intentional steps to guard your marriage from distractions or challenges that could harm its foundation. And then of course there's always a spiritual connection. A spiritual connection is to reflect on the parallels between the wedding procession and Christ's love for His bride, which is the church. Paul talks about that in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 25 to 27. And so just as the procession highlights joy, holiness, and honor, so does God's covenant love for His people reflect holiness and joy and honor. And so the wedding procession in Song of Solomon chapter 3 verses 6 to 11 beautifully illustrates the sacredness, the joy, and the communal celebration of marriage. It reminds us that covenant love is a precious gift requiring honor and effort and the support of other people in order to flourish. Then there is a second theme, if you wish, in the poem, in the passages for today, and that is marital intimacy. Solomon 4 verse 1 to 16. Here we have a poetic celebration of the bride's beauty. First of all, an admiration of the bride's beauty in verses 1 to 7. So we look at verse 1, it says, "How beautiful you are, my darling, how beautiful you are. Your eyes are like doves behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats that have descended from Mount Carmel. And so the bridegroom begins with a heartfelt declaration of his bride's beauty, focusing on her eyes as symbols of gentleness and purity. The repeated praise emphasizes her uniqueness and her worth in his eyes. And then in verse 3 it says, your lips are like a scarlet thread, and your mouth is lovely. Your temples are like a slice of pomegranate behind your veil. So here the groom uses rich symbolic imagery to describe his bride's physical features, celebrating her individuality and her allure. And we need to remember that this was mainly an agrarian society here. This was not a technological society, but an agrarian society. So a lot of the images are from things that were a part of everyday life. The beauty of a pomegranate, its color and its texture could easily be used as a metaphor, if you wish, for the beauty of the bride. And then in verse 7 he says, you are altogether beautiful, my darling, and there is no blemish in you. That particular verse could be said of someone's bride in any age, at any time. It's universal. This statement reflects the bridegroom's complete admiration and acceptance of his bride, symbolizing the ideal of unconditional love in marriage. And then in verses 8 to 11, there's a call to intimacy. A call to intimacy. Verse 8, he says, come with me from Lebanon, my bride. May you come with me from Lebanon. Journey down from the summit of Ammana, from the summit of Senir and Hermon, from the dens of lions, from the mountains of leopards. The groom here invites his bride to join him, symbolizing the unity and mutual commitment that marriage brings. The mention of Lebanon and distant places suggests a journey together, emphasizing adventure and a shared life. In verse 9 he says, you have made my heart beat faster, my sister, my bride. You have made my heart beat faster with a single glance of your eyes, with a single strand of your necklace. And so here the phrase, my sister, my bride, underscores both the spiritual and the romantic dimensions of their relationship, reflecting closeness and respect. In verse 11 he says, your lips, my bride, drip honey. Honey and milk are under your tongue, and the fragrance of your garments is like the fragrance of Lebanon. So here the bride's words and affection are compared to honey and milk, symbolizing sweetness and abundance, reinforcing the pleasure of intimacy within marriage. And then there's another type of imagery that is spoken of here, and that's garden imagery from verses 12 to 16. In verse 12 he says, a garden locked is my sister, my bride, a rock garden locked, a spring sealed up. And so the bride here is likened to a private garden, symbolizing her purity and the exclusivity of their relationship. There's no one else that will become intimate with her other than the groom. The imagery reflects the sacredness of intimacy which is reserved for marriage. In verse 16 he says, awake, O north wind, and come, wind of the south. Make my garden breathe out fragrance. Let its spices be wafted abroad. May my beloved come into his garden and eat its choice fruits. And so this poetic invitation represents the awakening and the enjoyment of marital intimacy, portrayed as a shared and cherished experience. And so there's a particular lesson just from these few verses, and that is intimacy within marriage is God's gift to be cherished. We have to remember, God is the one who invented sex. God is the one who invented the pleasure that comes from intimacy, not human beings. That wasn't something we invented. That was something that God created and gave to mankind as a gift. The bridegroom's admiration for his bride reflects the joy and the beauty of physical and emotional closeness within the covenant of marriage. Intimacy is portrayed as a sacred and exclusive expression of love designed by God to strengthen the marital bond. The garden imagery reminds us that intimacy, like a garden, must be nurtured and protected in order to thrive. And so we have some basic applications from the material we've read thus far. For those who are engaged couples, the encouragement is to prepare for marriage with a sense of awe for the intimacy that God has designed to be shared exclusively within the covenant. Approach marriage as a partnership where emotional, spiritual, and physical connection are all equally valued. And then for married couples, the encouragement is to celebrate and to prioritize intimacy as a vital part of your relationship, recognizing it as a God-given expression of love. And that's easy to forget when we get busy with marriage and then family that comes with marriage and work and so on and so forth. It's easy to let this go. It's easy to forget to celebrate the intimacy that God has given us that nourishes our relationship. Invest time in affirming your spouse's worth and her beauty, building a foundation of trust and mutual admiration. And then the spiritual connection is that we need to reflect on how marital intimacy mirrors the closeness that God desires with His people, a relationship marked by love and exclusivity and joy. The very same qualities that are experienced by the couple in intimacy, these very same qualities, love and exclusivity and joy, are shared with God and His people. Ephesians chapter 5, 31 and 32. And so in Song of Solomon chapter 4, 1-16, poetically celebrates the beauty of marital intimacy, portraying it as a sacred and a joyful gift from God. Intimacy within marriage strengthens the bond between husband and wife and also reflects God's design for love and unity. And so we move on to a third theme, and that is the joy of covenant. Here we're looking at Song of Solomon in chapter 5, verse 1. The theme here is the affirmation of mutual giving and receiving in marriage. And so in chapter 5, verse 1, the poet writes, "I have come into my garden, my sister, my bride. I have gathered my myrrh along with my balsam. I have eaten my honeycomb and my honey. I have drunk my wine and my milk. Eat, friends, drink and imbibe deeply, O lovers." Wonderful poetic imagery of the bridegroom declaring his joy in entering the garden, which is a metaphor for the intimate union with his bride, the honeymoon, so to speak. The imagery of honey and wine and milk conveys sweetness and abundance and satisfaction, symbolizing the fulfillment of love and intimacy within marriage. The phrase, "my sister, my bride," again reaffirms the closeness and the dual dimensions of their relationship, both spiritual, my sister, and physical, my bride. The invitation to friends to eat and drink reflects a communal celebration of marriage, recognizing it as a blessing that brings joy not just to the couple or to the family, but also to the community as well. And so this moment celebrates the culmination of their union, affirming that their covenant relationship is marked by joy and unity and shared blessing. A lesson for us here, the joy of covenant lies in mutual giving and receiving in marriage. I repeat that. The joy of covenant lies in mutual giving and receiving in marriage. Marriage is designed as a partnership where both individuals give of themselves freely, creating a bond of mutual satisfaction and love. True intimacy, physical, emotional, and spiritual, is rooted in this reciprocal giving, reflecting God's design for unity in marriage. We create unity in marriage by giving and receiving. The celebration of their covenant reminds us that marriage is a gift to be cherished, bringing joy not only to the couple, but again, glorifying God and inspiring others, right? Isn't that how we feel? Those of us who've been married a long time, we see a young couple very much in love and just beginning their life together in marriage. We look at them, we go, oh, that brings back good memories and so on and so forth. You feel good at a wedding, especially when you see how much in love the young couple are with one another. Again, some applications here for married couples. Recognize the importance of mutual giving in your relationship, whether through acts of love or acts of communication or acts of service. Celebrate the joy of your covenant by prioritizing time together and affirming your spouse's value and contributions to your marriage. In other words, telling them and acknowledging to them the things that they bring into the relationship which bless you, and vice versa. For those who are preparing in marriage, the lesson or the application might be to understand that marriage is not about personal gain, but about mutual sacrifice and shared joy. Build habits of generosity and selflessness, and do that now in order to strengthen your future relationship. It's not enough to say, well, I'll become more patient after we're married, or I'll become more attentive after we're married. No, start practicing the things that will contribute to your union before you are married, and you will continue in those things to build a strong union once you are married. And then the spiritual connection, reflect on how God's covenant with His people, marked by His sacrificial love and abundant blessings, is mirrored in the joy and the unity of marriage itself. Again, Ephesians 5:31 and 32. Marriage is a reflection of the relationship that God has with the church. The key takeaway here in Solomon 5 verse 1 affirms the joy of covenant love in marriage, celebrating mutual giving and receiving as the foundation for true intimacy and unity. Marriage is a sacred relationship designed to bring delight and fulfillment to the couple while glorifying God. A couple of applications here for modern couples, and then we'll close out our lesson. First, for modern couples, one of the most valuable lessons from this passage is the importance of mutual giving in a relationship. Marriage thrives when both individuals prioritize serving and loving one another selflessly. Paul's words in Ephesians 5:21, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. These words remind us that love within marriage is not about dominance or control, but about mutual sacrifice and mutual support. When couples commit to serving one another, they reflect God's design for a healthy and joyful relationship. Another lesson is to cherish the joy and unity that comes from intimacy in marriage. Paul again emphasizes in 1 Corinthians 7:3 and 4 that spouses belong to one another, not in a possessive way, but in a loving, giving way that fosters trust and connection. Intimacy, both emotional and physical, should be approached as a sacred gift to be nurtured, not a duty, not an obligation. Couples who make intimacy a priority experience the richness of unity that actually strengthens their bond. And then finally, marriage is a covenant worth celebrating. Just as Jesus attended the wedding in Cana in John chapter 2 verses 1 to 11 and blessed the occasion by performing His first miracle, couples should take the time to celebrate their union and the blessings that it brings. And I add, when I say celebrating your union, I'm not just talking about on the anniversary of your marriage. Everybody kind of does that. They go out to dinner, there's small gifts, but rather throughout the year, we should be celebrating our relationship, our covenant relationship with one another. Whether through small everyday gestures or special moments of joy, celebrating your marriage reflects gratitude for the gift that God has given you, and it keeps your relationship vibrant and life-giving. All right, well that's our lesson for today as far as Song of Solomon is concerned. We have one more lesson that we will do. Here's the assignment for that. I want you to reread once again chapter 3 verse 6 to chapter 5 verse 1, and then finish out by reading 5 verse 2 to 8 verse 14, and we will cover that material in our next and final class. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.